What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Trick 10s. Today we are working on this Express 1748 Jetboat. This thing is sick. This boat originally was a 48 wide. Now the customer, before he brought it to me, decided that he wanted to try to take on this build himself. They cut the entire floor out, just kept the two sides. They replaced the floor with a sheet of 3/16 aluminum and they rolled it up in the front. They put some channels in here, they welded it solid. They did a very good job on that. They went ahead and installed all the stuff for the motor and the intake on the back and the jet, and they got the motor installed. Now, they brought the boat to me because they had a couple of issues when they were trying to finish up the bow of the boat. The bow of the boat that they had, the original pieces, were just trash. They had been cut up and bent and they could not get them to fit right. So I replaced the bow with a sheet of 1/8 of an inch aluminum diamond plate. I had to frame this thing out. It was not easy. It was definitely not pulled up enough in the front, but I'm really happy with the way it turned out, and I think it looks really good. The only downside to this boat build is that I lost the first 20 hours of footage when I filmed it, because I had uploaded it all into my MacBook, edited it, and the video was on the finishing touches. The MacBook crashed, and it's been in the shop for like a month. I'm hoping that when I get it back, I will have the video, but if not, this is where we're picking up from right here. Since I finished the bow, I went ahead and I did all the framing on this front deck. This is all 3x1 by 1/16 aluminum rectangular tube. We've got one big storage hatch here. This is gonna house 3 batteries, and then we've got 2 more on either side of that are small. I haven't built the lids for. And that gets us into the back. We've got 2 other big storage compartments. One of these is gonna be a rod locker, and one of them is just gonna be for storage. Now, these compartments are not gonna run all the way to the floor. It's very deep, and we need room in here to run these cables and our gas line and throttle cables. So I'm gonna have a false floor in here. These are gonna sit up about 6 inches off the bottom of the boat. That'll allow for all this stuff to pass through here. These 2 big hatches on either side, these are actually tapered. So the back of this is bigger than the front. It's kind of like a jet wing, and I think it's pretty sick because it's a jet boat. That's the first time I've built hatches like this that are tapered, and I think it really sets this thing off, so it'll look cool once it's all finished. I did build this console in here. This thing is actually set up perfectly. It has a nice little slope on it right here, so when you're standing up, it's angled, and this is all the original stuff that came in the jet ski. This is the original dash, and these are all the original controls in here. It's just hooked up on this little Batman steering wheel. This thing is sick. I put a little grab rail up on the front of it, just so you can have something to hold on to when you're getting up from the floor onto the front deck, and it really looks cool. So I still have a lot to do to this boat. I'm gonna try to focus on the back of it right now. I do have a swim platform that I plan to put on there. I just picked up a nice pipe bender, and I'm gonna put it to the test. I'm gonna bend a piece of pipe that's gonna roll back off the back of this boat about 2 feet. It's gonna come back around and kick in. It's gonna have a couple of gussets going down from that, and the top of that is gonna be diamond plated. It's gonna set this whole build off in here. It's really gonna give it a whole different look once the swim platform is on there. This whole build is gonna be kind of based off of like the rock-proof boats. It's gonna be very similar to those builds. I'm ready to get into this thing, so let's get back to work. All right, so check this thing out though. All of this was originally installed when he brought this boat to me the first time about a year ago. One of his welders did this. They installed all this, and since he's had it, he has installed this. This is like the bucket, I guess, that drops over, and that will allow this thing to go in reverse. It basically just shoots the water backwards, and they installed this UHMW on here. This is 3/8 of an inch UHMW. You can see inside of there, it's got bolts that run all the way up through the bottom of this, to the bottom of the hull. There are tons of these in here. I mean, hundreds of them. They run all the way up. There's like 10 rows of them. Lots and lots of bolts in here. You can see on the bottom, he's got a grate for his water intake. Don't mind his shitty trailer. This thing is a piece of crap. I'm gonna have to do something with that. It doesn't fit anymore because they widened the boat an entire foot. So what I'm gonna do is either alter this trailer, or I'm probably just gonna end up trying to find another trailer that will work for him. Now I did run this exhaust in here when he originally brought it to me. I brought it up well above the water line, and it runs right out the back right here. And this is basically just the exhaust port for the boat. I'm not 100% sure on anything that I'm doing with this because I've never done anything with a jet boat before. I'm not familiar with working on jet skis. I'm really not even familiar with inboard motors. But I'm gonna do the best I can. And I have a good feeling this is gonna be a learning process. The whole rig itself is just dope. I mean, the entire thing, it's going to be above and beyond when it's completely finished. And I'm excited to get back to work on this thing because it's been a minute. Now off the back of this transom, we're gonna cut this down here. He wants to bring this down as low as I can get it, all the way across the back. Then I'm gonna build a swim platform. It's basically gonna come out, roll around, come back. It's gonna have 2 gusset pipes coming down on either side. This will protect the back of this bucket and the jet on the back of the boat, not only from people kicking it and hitting it, but it will finish the back of this boat off and it will look sick. It's probably gonna be at least 20 inches, 2 foot, something like that. But it's gonna bring the back of this boat a lot farther off the back. One of the first things I'm gonna have to do, which is really gonna be a pain in the ass, is I'm gonna have to install this piece here. This is basically the piece that was in his original gas tank. Now this piece is too tall to fit into the gas tank that we put in there, but he wants to use it. The really shitty thing is that this tank is in here and you can't get it out because I welded these pieces down here and over there. I'm gonna have to cut those off and I'm gonna have to pull this up. I might even have to take these vertical supports out of here to get this gas tank out of here, because what I'm gonna do is, instead of having this gauge in here, I'm going to cut this out and I'm gonna have to build this tank up about 1 inch, and that will allow that piece to drop in there. Now it's gonna look funny, but that's the only way I can make it happen. I'm not gonna make the whole tank 1 inch taller because I just don't have room for it in there. And once I slide this over, it's gonna stick up inside of this hole underneath the console. That will allow him to get in there and access it and hook up all his cables and stuff. This is the shifter right here to go from forward to reverse. And all that does is it drops the bucket on the back of the jet. I'm excited to get back to work on this thing. I'm gonna go ahead and jump right into it. Let's get back to work. All right, so this is the pipe bender I just got. This thing is sick. I'm gonna show you how this works in a little bit, but I just cut a little piece of the pipe that I had in stock, and as you can see, I put it in there and it just snapped it right off. This is a 6061 pipe, which is not bendable. So I ordered some 6063 pipe, which should be bendable, and we'll have to come back to this. I'm trying to bend this stuff for the swim platform, but until I can get that pipe in, I'm gonna have to do something else. Now, when they took this boat and they put all these holes in here and put that UHMW on the bottom, they had to flip this thing over. It bent this piece right here. I don't know how they flipped this thing over with the motor in there, because this thing is heavy as crap without the motor in there, but obviously they had some issues. I think they flipped it onto some sawhorses. It bent my frame down here, and it broke one of the vertical supports over there. So I'm gonna have to repair those. But I've got to get this stupid ass gas tank out of here. This is the original piece that was in the jet ski, and it has all the sensors in it for the fuel gauges and tank and stuff, and it's kind of floating there. It did not fit into the tank I built because there wasn't enough room underneath the front deck, but we're gonna end up using this thing. You can see they just snap right on and plug and play. And by using this has the fuel pump inside of it too. You don't have to worry about hooking up an external fuel pump. So I'm gonna have to take all these hatches out of here. They're just sitting in here. I'm gonna get this tank out of here. I built this tank a while ago and it looks great, but unfortunately he doesn't want to use it like that. So I'm gonna have to cut some of these verticals going down here to get this tank out. I'm gonna pull it out and I'll cut a hole in the top of it and put like a little pipe ring around it to bring it up, at least another inch, inch and a half, whatever we gotta have to install that. So I'm gonna go ahead and put you all on the time lapse to get this thing out of here, and we'll see what we gotta do to it. Let's get back to work. right, so I got the tank out. This is the tank that I made like a year ago. I got all these things taped off, but you know, this is like for your sending unit. This is your vent, and this is the fill. And then this has the float inside of it. So you can hook up for here to tell how much gas in your tank. You run this off to your gauge. And the only thing that he would have to add is on this sender, you would have to add in an inline fuel pump, but he doesn't want to do that. He wants to use this big bulky son of a gun right here, which has the fuel pump built in here, down inside of it. And it's going to be a nightmare because if that thing ever goes bad and he has to replace it, he's going to have to get up underneath this console, through that little hole right there, and unscrew this thing and pull it all out of there. And he's going to have to try to find one of these old pumps from one of these jet skis that actually fits in here. But he wants to do it because he just wants to be able to plug and play these things right here instead of just running the electrical for him. So I'm trying to figure this out because this thing is weird. You see, it just has a seal around here, and I'll show you. I got the other tank over there. I didn't want to bring it in here because it still has some old gas in it. But basically, that drops into a hole. You can kind of see where it's got like this dirt line around here. It's like a half circle on here. Well, it has another flange that fits over top of this, and on the outside of that flange, it screws down. So it's basically like a big washer plate that sits over this, and it would attach around here with bolts. Well, this obviously isn't big enough for that to drop into to begin with, and it's a lot taller. So in order for me to make that happen, you know, we got probably 1.5 inches here. This thing actually compresses, which don't really understand what that's all about either. But even if we compressed it down, I'm still looking at 3/4 of an inch. I'm probably just gonna give them about 1.25 inches, something like that. But in order to make that happen, I can't just cut a hole in here the size of this and drop it in, because then I'm gonna have no way to attach this flange around here, because obviously this thing's taller. So I was thinking, I made this little sketch right here. I think I'm doing something like this. And if I cut out like a 7 or 8 inch hole in the top of this, and then weld like 1.5 inches, you know, collar, a ring around it, then put another washer plate on top of that, basically then this piece can drop in through that hole, and then I'll have another flange that's gonna sandwich on top of this that has this hole pattern in it right here, and I'll have to tap some screws into here. I'm gonna go show you the other tank. It's out back, so you get a better idea of this, and I think that's the only option I have to make this thing work. All right, so I know it's a little loud out here, but you can see what I was talking about now. This thing has this bolt hole pattern around here. This piece drops into that hole, and then the top of this, it comes in right up to the edge of these. And then there's some rust on here. That's where the old flange like dropped over that, and it all bolted together to hold this in there. And this tank is way taller and way bigger than the other tank I have, and there's no way I can fit this underneath that front deck, so that's why I made the aluminum tank. I guess I gotta get back over there and cut this hole out, try to get this thing put back together. Let's get back to work. All right, so you see what we got here. This is a piece of 0.125 aluminum. This is a sheet. I just sheared it 3/4 of an inch. I made this one 3/4 of an inch because I actually made that out of 1/4 inch. But this is a 7.5 inch ring, and I did 7.5 times 3.14, which is pi, ends up being right around 23.5 inches. So I'm gonna take this piece, it's gonna set up here, and then this is the 1/4 inch thick piece, and this needs to be thicker like that because it's gonna have to be drilled and tapped to hold that fuel pump in there. So it's gonna sit on top of that. Obviously I can't put it right over the hole or it will probably fall in there. But you can see, now we got our 1 inch spacer in here. So that's gonna work out perfect. And I'm gonna go ahead and put y'all back on the hyperlapse. I'm gonna get this thing tacked up, try to get it welded solid. Let's get back to work. All right, so you see what we got here? I welded this thing up solid, nice TIG bead all the way around it. Looks really good. That gives us our 1-inch height. It's kind of unorthodox, but it's gonna work. That will allow this whole piece to drop down in there, and this float right here, it's gonna have to come out this way. There's a baffle right along the edge of this side right here. And there's actually a retainer clip, like ring. It's like a washer that goes on here, and it's not quite like flat. It actually comes over and bends down this side a little bit. So I've got to get that piece. I'm not going to be able to just put a ring around here if I cut a flat piece, because you see how big that gasket is on there? It doesn't actually sink all the way in there. So it comes over and it drops down, you know, maybe a 1/4 inch and then comes back flat. So he has that piece. So I'm gonna let him put that in there. I'm gonna set it in there, but he's gonna put that piece back on and mark these holes and have to tap those in there. Unless he's gonna bring it or ship it to me, we'll see. But now I need to put this tank back up underneath that front console and get it staged up where it's gonna be. And I'm gonna attach it down to the floor and we'll get on to something else. Let's get back to work. All right, the gas tank is back in. That is a tight fit. I actually did not have to cut any of these verticals out. It just barely fit in there. And I remember now when I built this originally, I left that gap and it was tight going in there. And luckily, that little added lip I put on there, it still fit in there. It wasn't easy, but it's in there. That's one thing done, thank God. Now, you can see I got some cracks here. He put a lot of stress on this thing when he flipped it. This thing got bent down pretty bad. I'm gonna have to come back. I'm gonna cut up through here, pull that back up where it needs to be. And then I'm gonna try to finish framing from here back to the transom on either side of this motor. Because I need to get the height of this deck finished all the way to the back. That way I can cut down this back transom and start working on that swim platform. But what I'm planning on doing with this, I'm gonna frame this back with a piece of 3x1 tube from here all the way back. And then I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. And I might even try to get this a little bit closer in here. I wasn't sure how much room he was gonna need because he didn't have all this intake and stuff on here. He's not gonna use the intake box for this. It's gonna put like a K&N filter on here. So that's pretty much where everything's gonna sit. As you can see, that motor sits a lot taller than this deck height. So I need to frame this in so I can figure out how to build this hatch. This hatch is gonna have to taper up. It's gonna kind of come up, plateau, and then come back down. So it's gonna have like a hump in the center of it right there. There's really no other way to do it unless I build the whole, you know, back deck up 8 inches above the side of the hull, and that's gonna look stupid. So I think it will look cool like that, because we can also put like a seat pedestal in there. He can have a seat up there if he wants to sit down up here. So I think it's gonna be sick. I'm gonna try to get this framing done on either side, and then we'll pick up from there. Let's get back to work. All right, so I got these 1x3 tubes brought back from the transom up to the existing framing I had, and you can kind of really get the whole feel for it now. It's gonna look sick. I'm gonna have to frame obviously from here over to the side of the hull, and I'm probably gonna put another piece of this same tubing going right across here, maybe somewhere in this area, and that will allow me to have a platform here, because this is gonna be all hatch. I mean, look how wide this thing is. This is super wide across here. That's gonna be a gigantic drop-in hatch, and I'm not gonna run the hatch all the way to the transom here, so I'm definitely gonna run a piece across so that way I can, have a good spot to attach that hatch to. But man, it's gonna be huge. But it's gotta be like that though. You gotta be able to get in here and access all this stuff, so I don't know how else you could do it. But it looks really good. I'm gonna have to come back and do some framing on here, on these sides now, so I'm gonna get that started. Let's get back to work. All right, so I got this framing and stuff up here. It's just tack. This is why you just tack stuff, because I'm gonna have to drop this down. You look over here on this side, you can see it's got no gap in the back, and it's got a gap here, and the gap gets bigger and bigger. Now, my measurements from the top of this tube down to the floor, it's the same. It's the same here, it's 16, and right here it's 16, and back here, it's like 15 3/4. So it's close, but this has got to come down. It's gonna look stupid, and it's not gonna give me the gap that I need. I want to have a gap right in here. That way I can come back and put LED lights up underneath that rail. It really sucks, but what I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna cut this weld. I've got a weld here and on the other side on all these tubes. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'm gonna end up chopping probably about a 1/2 inch off of this tube, maybe a little bit more. But I need to drop this down right here. I should just be able to flex it from there, because this whole front deck, all these cross pieces in this front deck, they're not actually attached to the side of the hull. They're just sitting up on these legs down here. So once I get these legs shortened, I should be able to drop this down. Then I'm gonna have to come back here, and I just gotta cut these 2 little tacks I got right here, and hopefully I can just drop that down, because I'd like to have at least an inch or more in this area over here. I mean, it's not really gonna make a huge difference, because this thing's gonna have to come way up in the center, but I think it would look a lot better when the boat is finished, and especially when it's in the water. Even though it's not gonna be completely flat in the same distance from the bottom of the hull to the top of my deck, the whole deck will still be streamlined, and it will kind of flow with the railing and the top of the boat. Well, and get back to work. right, so I got all of the framing for this back deck area completed. It's all tacked up. Everything is set in place and welded. I've got to come back and obviously I'm going to add some supports in between here and some vertical supports. I got to make sure this back deck is strong because not only is this boat going to be running in the shallows, and it's basically made to just run over anything in its path, rocks, stumps, people if you're in the water. I mean, it's going to be getting a lot of abuse. So this thing has to be strong. And not only that, but this whole area back here, it's like 52 inches square. And it's gonna have a gigantic hatch that goes in here with gas pistons to open it up so you can work on the motor. And I gotta make sure that it's strong just to hold that hatch. That hatch is gonna be massive. So it's gonna be a pretty big ordeal building a hatch that size. I've never done one, especially the way it has to taper up to go over this motor. So the whole thing is sick though. And I'm excited about finishing this thing up. I cannot wait to put this thing in the water. That is really the whole like driving goal for me. I want to drive this thing around. I want to see what it can do and how it handles. And I think it's going to be fun. In part 2, I'm going to start working on this swim platform. Now that I got this whole deck height figured out, I can cut this transom down and I can start framing and rolling with my new pipe bender, all the pipes that are going to hold the swim platform off the back of this transom. It's going to change the entire look of this boat. It's just going to be awesome. I mean, I'm hyped about this build. I've been trying to get this thing done forever, and now's the time. It's going to happen. It's going to happen quick. I'm putting a lot of time in on this thing, and I can't wait to get back to work on it. I appreciate you guys watching. Hit that like, subscribe button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I'll see you all next time. Got to get back to work.